The gunshot echoed through the canyon just as Irving reached for his canteen, and he knew immediately someone was in serious trouble up in those mountains. It was late September in 1876, and the Colorado Territory had turned cold enough at night to kill an unprepared soul, especially up where the aspens were already dropping their golden leaves across the rocky terrain. Daniel had been riding along the trail that led toward El Dorado Canyon when the sound reached him, followed by what might have been a woman's scream, though the wind made it hard to tell for certain. He dug his heels into his horse's flanks, urging the bay gelding up the steep incline that branched off from the main path. The animal was sure-footed despite the loose shale, and Daniel trusted him completely after 3 years together on the range. His heart pounded as he climbed higher, scanning the mountainside for any sign of what had caused the commotion. Another cry reached his ears, clearer this time, definitely a woman, and his jaw tightened with determination. The trail narrowed dangerously as he rounded a blind corner, and there, about 50 yards ahead, he spotted the wagon. It had gone off the path and was wedged between 2 large boulders, tilted at a precarious angle that suggested the slightest movement might send it tumbling down the mountainside. A woman in a dark blue traveling dress stood on a flat rock nearby, her arms wrapped around herself as she stared at something below. When she heard his horse's hooves on stone, she whirled around, her face pale with fear and relief mixed together. "Please," she called out, her voice shaking. "Please, you have to help me. My driver, he's been thrown from the wagon, and I think he's badly hurt. And the horses, they broke free and ran off, and I do not know what to do." Daniel dismounted quickly, tying his horse to a sturdy pine before making his way carefully across the rocky ground. As he got closer, he could see she was younger than he had initially thought, probably around 22 or 23, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins, and now hung in disheveled waves around her shoulders. Her green eyes were wide with panic, and there was a scrape on her left cheek that had bled a little. "My name is Daniel Irving," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Where is your driver?" She pointed down the slope with a trembling hand. "There, about 20 feet down. He went over when the wheel broke, and I heard him cry out, but now he is not moving at all." Daniel peered over the edge and spotted the man lying motionless among the rocks and scrub brush. "I will get to him. You stay right here and do not move. This ground is not stable." "I will not go anywhere," she promised, wrapping her arms tighter around herself. He found a safe route down, bracing himself against the larger rocks and testing each foothold before committing his weight. The driver was an older man, probably in his 50s, and when Daniel reached him, he could see immediately that the situation was grim. The man's neck was bent at an unnatural angle, and there was no rise and fall of his chest. Daniel checked for a pulse anyway, pressing his fingers against the cold skin of the man's throat, but found nothing. He had died either from the fall or immediately after. Climbing back up was harder than going down, but Daniel managed it, though his boots slipped once on the loose gravel. When he reached the woman again, she searched his face desperately for good news. "I am so sorry," he said quietly. "He is gone. There was nothing anyone could have done." Her hand flew to her mouth and tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh God, oh no. Martin has been with my family for 15 years. This is all my fault. I insisted we take this route because I was in a hurry to reach Denver, and he told me it was dangerous this time of year, but I would not listen." "This is not your fault," Daniel said firmly. "Accidents happen in these mountains all the time. The important thing now is getting you to safety before nightfall. It will be freezing up here once the sun goes down, and that wagon is not going anywhere." She nodded, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "Yes, Yes, you are right. I just feel so terrible leaving him down there. We will send someone back for him once we reach town, Daniel assured her. Can you ride? I have before, though not often. You will ride with me. My horse can handle 2 for the distance we need to cover. He glanced at the tilted wagon. Do you have anything in there you absolutely need? We can only take what is essential. My bag, she said. It has my money and papers and a few other things I cannot replace. Daniel approached the wagon carefully, noting how it groaned and shifted slightly even though there was no wind. The whole thing could go over the edge at any moment. Where is it? On the seat, a brown leather bag with brass clasps. He could see it, just barely within reach if he leaned in from the side. The wagon creaked ominously as he stretched his arm through the opening, his fingers just brushing the leather. Another inch, and he had it. He pulled it free and stepped back quickly as the wagon shifted again, this time sliding a few inches closer to the drop-off. We need to go now, he said, handing her the bag. She clutched it to her chest and followed him back to where his horse waited patiently. Daniel mounted first, then reached down to pull her up behind him. She settled onto the horse's rump, her arms wrapping around his waist tentatively at first, then more firmly as the horse began to move. What is your name? He asked as they started down the mountain. Olivia. Olivia Anderson, she said, her voice close to his ear. I am from St. Louis originally, but I have been living in Santa Fe for the past year with my aunt. I was traveling to Denver to meet with the lawyer handling my late father's estate. I am sorry for your loss, Daniel said. And now to lose your driver as well. You have had a hard time of it. Martin was more than a driver. He was a kind man who told me stories about his grandchildren and always made sure I was comfortable during our travels. I cannot believe he is gone. They rode in silence for a while, navigating the treacherous mountain path with care. The sun was sinking lower in the sky, painting the rocks in shades of orange and red. Daniel could feel Olivia shivering behind him as the temperature dropped, and he wished he had brought an extra coat. How much further to town? She asked. About an hour to El Dorado Canyon if we keep a steady pace. There is a hotel there, nothing fancy, but it is clean and safe. We can report what happened to the sheriff and he will organize a recovery party. Thank you, she said softly. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along. I was beginning to think I would have to spend the night on that mountain alone. You would not have survived it, Daniel said bluntly. Not without proper gear and a fire. The temperature up here can drop below freezing this time of year. She shuddered and her arms tightened around him. I realize that now. I have been foolish about so many things on this journey. You are alive, and that is what matters. As they descended further, the path widened and became less hazardous. Daniel could feel the tension gradually leaving Olivia's body as the danger receded. She rested her cheek against his back, and he could sense her exhaustion in the way she leaned against him. Tell me about yourself, she said after a while. What brings a cowboy to these particular mountains today? I work on a ranch about 10 miles west of El Dorado Canyon. I was checking on some cattle that wandered into the high country when I heard the gunshot. Was that you? Yes, she admitted. I had Martin's pistol and I thought if I fired it, someone might hear and come help. I did not really expect anyone to actually come. Lucky for both of us that I was nearby. More than luck, I think. Providence, perhaps. The landscape began to change as they lost altitude, the barren rocks giving way to scattered pines and then denser forest. Daniel knew this country well, every twist in the trail and every landmark. They were making good time, and they would reach town well before full dark. Do you have family waiting for you in Denver? He asked. No family. Just the lawyer, Mr. Patterson. He sent word that there were documents I needed to sign regarding my father's property. My father owned a small freight business, and apparently there are decisions that need to be made about selling it or keeping it operational. That sounds complicated. Everything about my father was complicated, Olivia said with a hint of bitterness. He was not an easy man to know or to love, but he was still my father, and I suppose I owe it to his memory to handle his affairs properly. When did he pass? 3 months ago. Heart failure, the doctor said. He was only 52, but he worked himself hard all his life and never took time to rest. She paused. I had not seen him in over a year when he died. I was angry with him about something that seems so trivial now, and I let that anger keep me away. I regret that more than I can say. We all have regrets, Daniel said quietly. The trick is learning to live with them and do better going forward. Is that what you do? Do you have regrets? More than my share. He did not elaborate, and she did not press him, which he appreciated. The trail leveled out as they entered the valley, and Daniel could see the first buildings of El Dorado Canyon appearing in the distance. Smoke rose from chimneys, and lamplight glowed in windows as families prepared their evening meals. It was a small town, maybe 300 people at most, but it had everything necessary for survival. A general store, a hotel, a saloon, a church, and a sheriff's office. We are almost there, he said. I can see it. Oh, thank God, I have never been so happy to see civilization. Daniel guided his horse down the main street, which was really the only street, and stopped in front of the sheriff's office. He dismounted and then helped Olivia down, steadying her when her legs nearly gave out beneath her. I am sorry, she said, gripping his arm. I think I have been holding myself so tense for so long that my legs have forgotten how to work. Take your time. She stood there for a moment, taking deep breaths and trying to compose herself. In the lamplight spilling from the sheriff's window, Daniel got his first really good look at her. Despite the scrape on her cheek and the dirt on her dress, despite her disheveled hair and tear-stained face, she was beautiful. Not in the delicate, fragile way of the society women he occasionally saw in larger towns, but in a stronger, more substantial way. She had a square jaw and direct eyes, and there was intelligence and determination in her expression. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded, and together they entered the sheriff's office. Sheriff Tom Hardwick looked up from the paperwork spread across his desk, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Daniel. "Irving, what brings you to town on a Tuesday evening?" Then he noticed Olivia, and his expression shifted to concern. "What happened?" Daniel explained the situation quickly and efficiently, describing the broken wagon, the deceased driver, and Olivia's predicament. The sheriff listened carefully, taking notes and asking occasional questions. "I will get a party together first thing in the morning to bring Martin's body down," Sheriff Hardwick said when Daniel finished. "Miss Anderson, you have my sincere condolences. Is there anyone I should notify about what happened?" "Martin has a daughter in Colorado Springs," Olivia said. "I have her address in my papers. I will write to her tonight and arrange for his body to be sent to her for burial. I will cover all the costs, naturally." "That is good of you, miss. Now you are going to need a place to stay. The hotel is just down the street, and Mrs. Cooper runs a decent establishment. Clean rooms, good food." "Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate your help." Daniel walked Olivia to the hotel, carrying her bag while she clutched her shawl around her shoulders. The evening had turned genuinely cold, and frost was already forming on the wooden sidewalks. Mrs. Cooper, a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, took one look at Olivia's bedraggled state and immediately swept into action. "You poor dear, what you must have been through. Come in, come in. I will get you a room and some hot water for washing, and I will bring up a tray of food. You look like you have not eaten all day." "I have not," Olivia admitted. "Thank you so much." While Mrs. Cooper bustled around making arrangements, Olivia turned to Daniel. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but she held herself together with visible effort. "I do not know how to thank you properly," she said. "You saved my life today, Mr. Irving. I will never forget that. I am just glad I was in the right place at the right time. You get some rest now. Things will look better in the morning. Will I see you again? I would like to properly express my gratitude when I am not quite so overwhelmed." Daniel hesitated. He had planned to return to the ranch tonight, but something made him reconsider. "I will come by tomorrow morning to check on you and see if you need anything. How does that sound?" Her face lit up with a smile that transformed her features. "That sounds wonderful. Thank you, Daniel." It was the first time she had used his given name, and he liked the way it sounded in her voice. He tipped his hat to her and left the hotel, leading his horse to the livery stable for the night. He would have to get a room himself at the boarding house, and he would need to send word to the ranch explaining why he had not returned. But as he walked through the quiet streets of El Dorado Canyon, his thoughts kept returning to Olivia's grateful smile and the way she had held onto him during the ride down the mountain. He had not felt this kind of pull toward a woman in years, not since before the war, and it unsettled him. She was clearly educated and refined, from a completely different world than his own rough existence. She would handle her father's business in Denver and then return to her life in Santa Fe or St. Louis, and he would go back to herding cattle and sleeping under the stars. Their paths had crossed by pure chance, and soon they would diverge again, and that would be the end of it. Except, he could not quite convince himself that was true. That night, Daniel lay awake in his narrow bed at the boarding house, listening to the wind howl through the canyon and thinking about the strange turns life could take. This morning, he had been a simple ranch hand with no concerns beyond checking on strayed cattle. Now he was caught up in the orbit of a woman who had somehow lodged herself in his thoughts after just a few hours. He finally fell asleep near midnight and dreamed of auburn hair and green eyes that looked at him with trust, and something that might have been more. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with frost sparkling on every surface like scattered diamonds. Daniel washed up at the pump behind the boarding house, shaved carefully in the small mirror he carried in his saddlebag, and put on his cleanest shirt. He told himself he was not going to any special effort for Olivia's sake, but he knew that was a lie. He arrived at the hotel just as the breakfast service was beginning. Mrs. Cooper greeted him with a knowing smile. "Miss Anderson is in the dining room having her breakfast. She has been asking if you had come by yet." "Has she? I told her I would check on her this morning." "Well, you are a man of your word, Mr. Irving. Go on in. I will bring you some coffee and eggs if you would like." "That would be fine, thank you." He found Olivia sitting at a table near the window, dressed in a fresh traveling suit of deep green that matched her eyes. Her hair was pinned up properly now, though a few tendrils had escaped to curl around her face. She looked rested and composed, though there was a sadness in her expression that had not been there yesterday, probably from thinking about Martin. When she saw Daniel, her whole face brightened. She stood up, then seemed to remember herself and sat back down, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Please join me. I was hoping you would come." Daniel sat down, suddenly feeling awkward in a way he had not felt since he was a young man courting his first sweetheart. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Much better, thank you. A hot bath and a good night's sleep worked wonders, and Mrs. Cooper brought me some salve for the scrape on my face." She touched her cheek self-consciously. "I have been thinking about yesterday, about everything that happened, and I realize I never properly thanked you. If you had not heard that gunshot, if you had not come looking, I would certainly have died on that mountain. You do not need to keep thanking me, but I do. You risked your own safety climbing down to check on Martin, and then you brought me safely to town and made sure I was cared for. That is not nothing, Daniel. Mrs. Cooper arrived with his coffee and a plate of eggs and bacon. After she left, Olivia leaned forward slightly, her expression earnest. I have been thinking about how I might repay you for your kindness. I know that men in your profession do not make a great deal of money, and I have some resources at my disposal. I would like to offer you a financial reward for saving my life. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. I do not want your money, Miss Anderson. Please, do not be offended. I am only trying to show my appreciation in a practical way. I did not help you yesterday because I expected payment. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and because I would hope someone would do the same for my sister or my mother if they were in trouble. Olivia sat back, looking chastened. You are right, of course. I apologize. That was crass of me. I am used to solving problems with money because that is what my father always did, but clearly you are not motivated by such things. I am not offended, Daniel said, his tone softening. I understand you want to express your gratitude, but the truth is, I am just glad you are safe. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Then Olivia said, The sheriff came by earlier this morning. He said the recovery party is heading up to the pass to bring Martin down. I gave him the address for Martin's daughter, and I wrote a letter explaining what happened. I feel terrible about all of this. It was an accident, a tragic one, but still an accident. I know, but I keep thinking about all the choices that led to that moment. If I had not insisted on taking the mountain route, if we had left a day earlier or a day later, if I had not been so stubborn and impatient. You could drive yourself mad thinking that way, Daniel said. Trust me, I know. She looked at him with interest. You sound like you speak from experience. I do. I spent a lot of years blaming myself for things that were not really in my control. It is a hard habit to break. What kinds of things? Daniel hesitated. He did not usually talk about his past, especially not with people he barely knew. But there was something about Olivia that made him want to open up, to share the parts of himself he usually kept hidden. I was in the war, he said finally. I fought for the Union Army, and I saw men die in ways that still give me nightmares. For a long time after, I convinced myself that if I had just been faster or smarter or braver, I could have saved some of them. It took me years to understand that I was just one person in a situation much bigger than myself, and that sometimes terrible things happen no matter what we do. Olivia reached across the table and touched his hand gently. Thank you for telling me that, and thank you for your service to the country. Her hand was warm on his, and Daniel felt that pull again, that strange magnetism that seemed to draw them together. He looked into her eyes and saw understanding there, and compassion, and something else that made his heart beat faster. What will you do now? He asked, reluctantly pulling his hand back. Will you still try to make it to Denver? I have to. The meeting with the lawyer is important, and I cannot put it off indefinitely. But I have lost my transportation and my driver, so I am not quite sure how to proceed. The stage comes through here twice a week. The next one should arrive tomorrow afternoon. Then I suppose I will wait for the stage. Mrs. Cooper has already said I am welcome to stay as long as I need. Daniel made a decision that surprised him even as he heard himself speak. I am planning to ride to Denver myself in a few days. I have some business there regarding the ranch. If you would prefer not to travel alone, you would be welcome to accompany me. Olivia's eyes widened. Truly, you would do that? It is a 2-day ride, so we would need to camp one night along the way, which might not be proper by your standards. But I give you my word I would be a perfect gentleman. "I trust you completely," she said without hesitation. "You have already proven yourself to be a man of honor. And honestly, after what I have just been through, I would feel much safer traveling with someone I know rather than alone on a stagecoach full of strangers. Then it is settled. I need to return to the ranch today to take care of a few things, but I will be back the day after tomorrow and we can leave first thing in the morning. I will be ready. And Daniel," she smiled at him, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Thank you. Again. I seem to be saying that a lot. You are welcome. Again." He finished his breakfast and stood to leave, but Olivia stood as well. "Would it be terribly forward of me to ask if you might show me around the town before you go? I would like to stretch my legs a bit, and I am curious about this place." "It would not be forward at all. I would be happy to." They walked together through El Dorado Canyon, and Daniel pointed out the various establishments. The general store run by Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher, the church where Reverend Matthews held services every Sunday, the saloon that Daniel tactfully said was not a place suitable for a lady, and the schoolhouse that served the dozen or so children who lived in the area. "It is a small town," Olivia observed, "but it seems like a good community. Everyone we have passed has been very friendly." "It is a good place," Daniel agreed. "Hard living, but honest. The people here look out for each other." "You think you will stay here permanently?" I had not thought much about it. I have been working at the ranch for 3 years now, and it suits me well enough. I suppose I will stay as long as the work is there. "No dreams of owning your own spread someday," Daniel laughed, though there was little humor in it. "That takes capital I do not have. A cowhand's wages are enough to keep me fed and clothed, but not much more." "What if you had capital? Would you want your own ranch then?" "Maybe. I have not let myself think about it too much. No point in dreaming about things that are not going to happen." Olivia looked like she wanted to say something more, but they had reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land. The mountains rose up in the distance, their peaks already dusted with snow. It was beautiful country, wild and untamed, and Daniel felt a surge of affection for it. "I should head back to the hotel," Olivia said reluctantly. "I have letters to write and arrangements to make, but I have enjoyed this walk very much, as have I." They walked back to the hotel together, and when they reached the front steps, Olivia turned to him with a serious expression. "I will see you the day after tomorrow. You will, I promise." "Good. I find myself looking forward to it more than I probably should." Before Daniel could respond to that intriguing statement, she had gathered her skirts and hurried inside. He stood there for a moment, staring at the door she had disappeared through, wondering what exactly was happening between them. He mounted his horse and began the ride back to the ranch, but his mind was not on the familiar landscape. Instead, he kept replaying every conversation he had had with Olivia, analyzing every look and gesture, trying to understand what he was feeling and whether she might be feeling it too. By the time he reached the ranch, he had come to a startling realization. He was falling for her. Hard and fast like a fool, for a woman he had known for barely a day. It was ridiculous. It was impractical. It was probably going to end in heartbreak, because women like Olivia Anderson did not end up with men like Daniel Irving. But knowing all that did not change the way his heart lifted at the thought of seeing her again in 2 days. His boss, Sam Carter, was waiting for him when he rode into the yard. Sam was a fair man in his 50s who had built his ranch from nothing and had earned Daniel's respect and loyalty. "I was starting to worry about you," Sam said. "Got your message that you had to stay in town overnight, but no details." Daniel dismounted and told Sam the whole story. When he finished, Sam whistled low. "Sounds like quite an adventure. And now you are riding this woman all the way to Denver." "She needs someone to travel with, and I was planning to go there anyway to pick up those supplies you wanted and meet with that cattle buyer." "Sure you were," Sam said with a knowing grin. "And it has nothing to do with the fact that you have that look in your eyes." "What look?" "The look a man gets when he has met a woman who matters. I have seen it before, Irving. I wore it myself when I met my wife." Daniel could not quite meet his boss's eyes. "It is not like that, if you say so, but just be careful, all right. You are a good man and a good worker, and I would hate to see you get hurt." "I appreciate that, Sam, I really do, but I am not fool enough to think anything could come of this. She is from a different world than mine. Sometimes worlds collide in surprising ways. You never know." Daniel spent the rest of that day and all of the next working hard on the ranch, trying to keep his mind occupied. But no matter how many fences he mended or how many cattle he checked on, his thoughts kept drifting back to Olivia. He wondered what she was doing, whether she was thinking about him, whether she was as eager for their journey as he was. On the morning he was supposed to return to El Dorado Canyon, he woke before dawn and took extra care with his appearance. He packed his saddlebags with supplies for the trip to Denver, making sure he had enough food and camping gear for 2 people. He cleaned and oiled his rifle, more out of habit than expectation of trouble, and made sure his horse was well rested and ready for the long ride ahead. "You look like you are going courting, not traveling," Sam observed when Daniel was ready to leave. "I look the same as always." "Sure you do. Well, take care of yourself and take care of that young lady, and Irving. If you decide you want to stay in Denver or wherever she is headed next, I will understand. Sometimes a man's path takes him in unexpected directions." "I will be back in a week," Daniel said firmly. "This is just a ride to Denver, nothing more." But even as he said it, he was not entirely sure he believed it. The ride to El Dorado Canyon seemed to take forever, though in reality it was only a few hours. When the town finally came into view, Daniel felt his pulse quicken. He went straight to the hotel and found Olivia waiting on the front porch, dressed in practical traveling clothes with her hair braided simply down her back. She had a small trunk and her leather bag beside her. "You came," she said, and there was relief in her voice as if she had been worried he might not. "I said I would." "I know, but I have found that not everyone keeps their promises." Daniel dismounted and secured the trunk to his horse, making sure the weight was distributed evenly. "Some people do. You just have to find the right ones." They set out north toward Denver, following the well-traveled road that wound through the foothills. The morning was crisp and clear, perfect weather for riding, and Olivia seemed to be in good spirits despite the somber errand that awaited her. "Tell me about your life in Santa Fe," Daniel said after they had been riding for an hour. "What were you doing there?" "Living with my aunt, mostly. She is my mother's sister, and she has been trying to marry me off to various suitable young men for the past year." Olivia made a face. "It has been exhausting. No luck finding someone you liked." "Oh, there were plenty I liked well enough. But liking someone and loving them are 2 different things, and I was not willing to settle for less than love, no matter how much my aunt insisted I was being unrealistic." "That does not sound unrealistic to me. That sounds sensible." "You would be in the minority with that opinion, at least among my aunt's social circle. They all think I am too particular, too independent, too difficult. Maybe you just have not met the right person yet." She glanced at him, and there was something in her expression that made his heart skip. "Maybe I have, and I just do not know what to do about it." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Daniel did not know how to respond, so he said nothing, but he felt the shift in the atmosphere, the way the conversation had suddenly ventured into more intimate territory. They rode in silence for a while, but it was a comfortable silence. the kind that happens between people who are growing easy with each other. The landscape changed as they traveled, the rugged mountains giving way to gentler hills and then to open plains. They saw antelope in the distance and a golden eagle circling overhead. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat the lunch Mrs. Cooper had packed for them: cold chicken, fresh bread, and apples. They sat on a fallen log near a small creek, watching the water tumble over smooth rocks. "Can I ask you something personal?" Olivia said, peeling her apple with a small knife she had produced from her bag. "You can ask. I cannot promise I will answer." "Fair enough. You mentioned being in the war. Do you have family? People who were waiting for you when you came home?" Daniel took a breath. "I had family. My parents and my younger sister, Emma. They had a farm in Kansas, a good piece of land that my father worked for 30 years. When I came back from the war, I found out they had all died of cholera while I was gone. The farm had been sold to pay debts. Everything I had thought I would come home to was just gone. Oh, Daniel, I am so sorry. It was a long time ago, 10 years now. I have made my peace with it, mostly." "Is that why you became a cowboy? Because you had nowhere else to go, more or less?" "I drifted for a while, taking whatever work I could find. Eventually, I ended up in Colorado territory, and Sam Carter gave me a job. It has been a good life, all things considered. Not what I imagined when I was younger, but good enough." Olivia reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You have had a lot of loss in your life. I think that makes you very brave." "I do not feel brave. I just feel like someone who kept putting one foot in front of the other because stopping was not an option. That is what bravery is, though, keeping going even when everything is hard." They finished their lunch and continued riding. The day wore on, and the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Daniel had been keeping an eye out for a good place to camp, somewhere with water and shelter and grazing for the horses. He found it just as the light was starting to fade. A small grove of cottonwood trees near a stream, with a natural windbreak provided by a rocky outcropping. He helped Olivia down from her horse and began setting up camp while she stretched her legs and gathered kindling for a fire. "I am not used to this kind of outdoor living," she admitted as she watched him expertly build the fire. "But there is something appealing about it, something simple and honest. It is not for everyone. Most people prefer a roof over their heads and a soft bed. I like soft beds as much as anyone. But I also like this. Being under the open sky with the stars coming out and the sound of the creek in the background. It feels real in a way that drawing rooms and tea parties never do." Daniel looked at her across the fire, seeing the way the flames lit up her face and made her eyes glow. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I thought you would be more delicate, more fragile, but you are stronger than you seem." "I have had to be. My mother died when I was 12 and my father was not the nurturing type. I learned early on that I could either crumble or adapt, and I chose adaptation. They ate dinner, which was dried beef and biscuits, nothing fancy but filling. Then they sat by the fire and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Olivia told him about growing up in St. Louis, about the books she loved to read, and the places she dreamed of seeing. Daniel told her about working on the ranch, about the satisfaction of a hard day's work and the beauty of watching the sun rise over the mountains. As the night grew later and the fire burned down to embers, Daniel unrolled the bedding he had brought. He gave Olivia the better blankets and positioned her sleeping area near the fire where it would be warmest. For himself, he chose a spot a respectful distance away, near the horses where he could keep watch. "Thank you for this," Olivia said as she settled into her makeshift bed. "For taking me to Denver, for keeping me company, for everything. You do not need to keep thanking me. I know, but I want you to understand how much it means to me. These past few days, since you rescued me on the mountain, I have felt safer and happier than I have in a very long time. You have given me something precious, Daniel, even if you do not realize it. What have I given you? Hope. The feeling that maybe the world is not as harsh and lonely as I sometimes think it is. The possibility that there are still good people in it, people worth knowing and trusting. Daniel did not know what to say to that, so he simply nodded. Sleep well, Olivia. You too. He lay awake long after her breathing had deepened and evened out into sleep. The stars were brilliant overhead, more than he could possibly count, and the night sounds of the plains surrounded them. He thought about what she had said, about hope and trust and the possibility of connection. He was in dangerous territory now, emotionally speaking. Every conversation with Olivia pulled him deeper, made him care more, made him imagine a future that was probably impossible. She was educated and refined, with resources and opportunities. He was a ranch hand with nothing to his name except his horse, his saddle, and his wages. When this trip was over, she would go back to her world and he would return to his, and that would be that. Except he could not quite convince himself to believe it anymore. Morning came with a spectacular sunrise that painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Daniel was already up and had the fire going again when Olivia emerged from her blankets, looking tousled and sleepy but beautiful. "Good morning," she said, smiling at him. "Did you sleep at all? Enough. I am used to keeping watch when I am camping. Were you watching over me? Someone had to." She came and sat beside him near the fire, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I slept better than I have in weeks. I think it was knowing you were nearby." Daniel felt his chest tighten with an emotion he was not quite ready to name. "We should get an early start. We can make Denver by late afternoon if we do not dawdle." They broke camp efficiently, working together like they had been doing it for years instead of just once. The morning ride was pleasant, with the temperature mild and the landscape gradually shifting as they approached the more settled areas around Denver. As the city came into view in the distance, Daniel felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. This was it. Once they reached Denver, once Olivia met with her lawyer and handled her father's business, there would be no reason for them to continue traveling together. She would make her own arrangements to return to Santa Fe or wherever she decided to go next, and he would head back to the ranch. "There it is," Olivia said, pointing at the growing cluster of buildings ahead. "Denver. I have heard it is quite a modern city now. It has grown a lot in recent years. Mining boom brought a lot of people and a lot of money." They rode into town just after 3 in the afternoon. Denver was indeed much larger and more developed than El Dorado Canyon, with paved streets and brick buildings and a bustling energy that made it feel like a different world entirely. Daniel felt out of place here, but Olivia seemed to take it in stride. "I need to find the law office of Mr. Patterson," she said, "and I should probably find a hotel as well. The Brown Palace is supposed to be the finest hotel in Denver if you want something comfortable." "Will you stay there as well?" Daniel shook his head. "That is beyond my means. I will find a boarding house somewhere, but I will help you get settled first." They found the Brown Palace easily enough, an impressive building that looked more suited to a big eastern city than to the western frontier. Daniel helped Olivia with her trunk, and she checked in at the front desk while he waited in the lobby, feeling conspicuous in his dusty travel clothes among the well-dressed guests. When she came back, she had a key in her hand and a determined look on her face. "My room is on the 3rd floor. The clerk tells me that Mr. Patterson's office is only a few blocks from here, so I think I will go see him this afternoon and get it over with. Would you like me to accompany you? Would you? I know I should be able to handle this myself, but I confess I would feel better with you there." Then I will come." They walked to the law office together, and Daniel waited in the anteroom while Olivia met with Mr. Patterson. The meeting lasted over an hour, and when she finally emerged, she looked drained. "It is complicated," she said. "More complicated than I expected. My father left me everything, but there are debts to settle and decisions to make about the freight business. Mr. Patterson wants me to stay in Denver for at least a week to go through all the papers and meet with the people who worked for my father. A week is a long time. I know. I am sorry. I know you probably need to get back to your ranch." Daniel made a decision. "I will stay. The business I had here can wait, and Sam will not mind if I am gone a bit longer." "You do not have to do that." "I know I do not have to. I want to." Olivia's eyes filled with tears, and she blinked them back quickly. "Why are you so good to me, Daniel?" "Because I care about you," he said simply. "Because I think maybe you care about me too, and because I am not ready to say goodbye to you yet." She took his hand right there on the street, not caring who saw. "I care about you very much, more than I probably should after such a short time, but I cannot seem to help it. Neither can I." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, and Daniel felt the world narrow down to just the two of them. Then Olivia glanced around at the people passing by and seemed to remember where they were. "Come back to the hotel with me," she said. "We can have dinner in the dining room and talk about what happens next." That night, over a fine meal that Daniel would never have ordered for himself, they talked about their feelings openly for the first time. Olivia admitted that she had been drawn to him from the moment he appeared on the mountain pass, that his kindness and steadiness had touched something deep inside her. Daniel confessed that he had never expected to feel this way about anyone, that he had thought his heart was too battered and closed off to let anyone in. "But here you are," he said, "making me feel things I thought I had forgotten how to feel." "What do we do about it?" Olivia asked. "Our lives are so different, our circumstances so disparate. How could this possibly work? I do not know, but I would like to try to figure it out if you would." "I would. I really would." They spent the next week together in Denver, and it was the happiest week of Daniel's life. During the days, he occupied himself with his own business while Olivia met with lawyers and accountants and the various men who had worked for her father. In the evenings, they would meet for dinner and walk through the city streets, talking and laughing and growing closer with each passing day. Daniel learned that Olivia had a sharp business mind and was not intimidated by the men who tried to patronize her or take advantage of her supposed inexperience. She impressed Mr. Patterson by asking pointed questions and insisting on reviewing every document herself before signing anything. "My father may not have taught me much about affection," she told Daniel one evening, "but he did teach me about business. He used to let me sit in his office when I was young, and I absorbed more than he realized." By the end of the week, Olivia had made several important decisions. She sold the freight business to a competitor for a fair price, settled her father's debts, and found herself in possession of a considerable sum of money. She also owned outright the house her father had lived in Denver, which she decided to keep for the time being. "I could sell it," she told Daniel, "but something makes me want to hold on to it. Maybe because it is the last tangible connection I have to my father, or maybe because I like the idea of having a place to come back to if I need it." "That makes sense." They were walking through a park near the hotel, enjoying the late afternoon sunshine. The week was almost over, and neither of them had addressed the question of what would happen next. Finally, Olivia stopped walking and turned to face him. "Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. All right? What do you want from life, from the future, from us? Because I know what I want, but I am afraid to say it in case it is not the same as what you want." Daniel took a deep breath. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to build something with you, a home and a future and a family. I want to work hard and make you proud and never give you a reason to regret choosing me. That is what I want, Olivia. But I do not know if it is possible, because I do not have much to offer you except my love and my promise to always do right by you. Tears were streaming down Olivia's face now, but she was smiling. That is everything I want too. And you do have something to offer me, something precious. You offer me yourself, and that is more valuable than all the money in the world. But where would we live? How would we make it work? I have been thinking about that, Olivia said. What if we bought a ranch of our own? I have the money from selling my father's business. We could find a good piece of land, build it up together. You know ranching, and I could handle the business side. We could make it work, Daniel. I know we could. He stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. You would do that? Give up your life in Santa Fe, your aunt's social circle, all of that to ranch with me? That was never my life, not really. It was just what I was doing while I figured out what I actually wanted. And now I know. I want a life with you, wherever that takes us. Daniel pulled her into his arms, right there in the public park, and kissed her. It was their first kiss, and it was sweet and perfect and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling like fools. Is that a yes? Olivia asked breathlessly. That is a definite yes. Yes to all of it. Yes to you. They spent the rest of the evening making plans. Daniel would return to the ranch to give Sam proper notice and gather his few belongings. Olivia would start looking at properties for sale in the area, preferably somewhere not too far from El Dorado Canyon, since Daniel had grown fond of that country. They would get married as soon as possible, not wanting to wait when they had already found what they were looking for. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the small church in El Dorado Canyon. It was a simple ceremony with just a handful of people in attendance. Sam Carter and his wife, Sheriff Hardwick, Mrs. Cooper from the hotel, and a few of the other ranch hands who had worked with Daniel. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony, and Olivia wore a simple dress of cream-colored silk that made her look like an angel. When Daniel slipped the plain gold band onto her finger and promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his days, he meant every word with his whole heart. And when Olivia made the same promises to him, he knew she meant them just as much. They spent their wedding night in the hotel, and Daniel discovered that loving Olivia physically was every bit as wonderful as loving her emotionally and mentally. She was passionate and tender and completely present with him in a way that made him feel truly seen for the first time in his life. The next morning, they began their life together in earnest. They had found a property about 15 miles from El Dorado Canyon, 500 acres of good grazing land with a creek running through it, and a small house that needed work but had good bones. The previous owner had given up ranching after his wife died and was willing to sell for a reasonable price. Daniel threw himself into fixing up the house and building up the ranch. He bought a small herd of cattle with Olivia's money, promising himself he would pay back every cent once the ranch started turning a profit. Olivia proved to be every bit as capable as she had claimed, handling the financial side of things with confidence and making smart decisions about where to invest their resources. But more than that, she proved to be a true partner in every sense of the word. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to tend the vegetable garden, to mend fences and doctor sick calves. She was not afraid of hard work, and she never complained about the long hours or the simple living conditions. "This is what I wanted," she told Daniel one evening as they sat on the porch of their little house, watching the sun set over the mountains. "A real life with a real purpose and a man I love beside me. I am happier than I ever thought possible." "So am I," Daniel said, pulling her close. "You saved me, Olivia, just as surely as I saved you on that mountain pass." "We saved each other," she corrected. "And we will keep saving each other every day for the rest of our lives." The first year was hard but good. They worked from dawn until dusk, building up the ranch and making their house into a real home. Daniel hired a couple of hands to help with the cattle, good men who worked hard and respected Olivia as the co-owner of the operation. Word spread that the Irving ranch was well run and fair, and they had no trouble finding buyers for their cattle when the time came. By the end of their first year of marriage, the ranch was profitable, and Daniel had been able to pay back a good portion of what they had initially invested. He was proud of what they had accomplished, but even more proud of how their relationship had deepened and grown stronger through all the challenges. Olivia turned out to be even more amazing than he had realized. She had a gift for seeing the potential in things and the determination to make that potential a reality. Under her guidance, they diversified beyond just cattle, adding horses and chickens and even a few pigs. She kept meticulous books and always seemed to know exactly where they stood financially. But she was also warm and loving, and never too tired to sit with Daniel on the porch after a long day and talk about their dreams for the future. On their first anniversary, Daniel gave her a locket with a tiny picture of the two of them inside, taken by a traveling photographer who had passed through El Dorado Canyon. Olivia cried when she opened it, and Daniel gathered her into his arms. "Why are you crying? Is something wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," she said through her tears. "Everything is so right it almost scares me. I keep waiting for something bad to happen, for this happiness to be taken away." "It will not be," Daniel promised. "We are building something strong here, something that will last. I will make sure of it." That night, Olivia told him she was pregnant. Daniel was overcome with joy and terror in equal measure. He was going to be a father. He and Olivia were going to have a child together, a new life that was part of both of them. "Are you happy?" Olivia asked, searching his face anxiously. "I am more than happy. I am overwhelmed and grateful and scared and excited all at once." "Me too. But I think we can do this, Daniel. I think we can be good parents." "I think so too." The pregnancy was not easy for Olivia. She suffered from severe sickness in the early months and struggled to keep food down. Daniel did everything he could to help, taking over most of her usual chores and bringing her ginger tea and dry toast, which seemed to be the only things she could tolerate. But as the months passed and her belly grew round with their child, the sickness eased and Olivia bloomed with health and happiness. She loved being pregnant, loved feeling the baby move inside her and talking to the little one constantly. Daniel loved it too. He would rest his hand on her belly in the evenings and feel the baby kick, and the reality of it would overwhelm him. He was going to be a father. This incredible woman was going to give him a child. Their son was born on a cold February night in 1878, after a long and difficult labor that nearly broke Daniel's heart to witness. He stayed by Olivia's side the whole time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with cool cloths, feeling helpless and desperate as she struggled to bring their child into the world. But when it was finally over, when the midwife placed the squalling, red-faced baby in Olivia's arms, Daniel knew that every moment of fear and pain had been worth it. His son. Their son. "What should we name him?" Olivia asked, her face glowing with exhausted joy. "I was thinking maybe William, after my father, if that is all right with you." "William Irving. It is perfect." Daniel held his son for the first time and felt something shift deep inside him. This tiny person was depending on him, trusting him to provide and protect and guide. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. The months after William's birth were exhausting but joyful. Daniel learned to change diapers and rock a fussy baby to sleep and function on very little sleep. Olivia recovered slowly but steadily, and soon she was back to helping run the ranch, though she had to pause frequently to nurse the baby. "We should hire someone to help in the house," Daniel suggested one morning after a particularly sleepless night. "You are doing too much." "We cannot afford it yet," Olivia said practically. "And besides, I like doing things myself. It makes me feel useful." "You are more than useful. You are essential. To this ranch, to William, to me." She smiled at him and kissed him softly. "I love you, Daniel Irving." "I love you too, Olivia Irving." Life settled into a rhythm over the next few years. The ranch continued to prosper, and they were able to expand their holdings and improve their house. They added a second bedroom for William, and a proper dining room for entertaining the few friends and neighbors they had made. William grew into a bright, active little boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. He loved following Daniel around the ranch and tried to help with chores, even when he was far too small to be of any real assistance. Daniel loved every minute of it, loved watching his son discover the world and grow stronger and more capable each day. When William was 3, Olivia told Daniel she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter was born on a sunny day in May, with far less drama than her brother's arrival. They named her Rose, and she was a peaceful, happy baby who rarely cried and seemed content to observe the world with her solemn gray eyes. "2 children," Olivia said wonderingly as she nursed Rose while William played at her feet. "A son and a daughter. I never imagined I would be this blessed." "Neither did I, but I am grateful for it every single day." The years passed quickly, marked by small moments of joy and occasional challenges. There were hard winters when the cattle suffered and they worried about money. There were illnesses and injuries, close calls that reminded them how fragile life could be. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything bearable. Daniel watched his children grow and marveled at the people they were becoming. William was bold and adventurous, always testing boundaries and getting into scrapes. Rose was quieter and more thoughtful, with a deep love of animals and a gentle way about her. They were both smart and healthy and deeply loved. On their 10th anniversary, Daniel and Olivia sat on the porch of their much-improved house, watching William and Rose play in the yard. The ranch had grown substantially, and they now employed 6 ranch hands year-round. They had become well-respected members of the community, known for their fair dealing and their generosity. "Do you remember that day on the mountain pass?" Olivia asked, leaning her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Every detail," Daniel said. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even covered in dust and scared out of your mind. I remember thinking you were an angel, sent to save me, and in a way I was right. You did save me, Daniel. You gave me a life I never could have imagined, a love I had stopped believing existed. You gave me the same. Before I met you, I was just drifting through life, not really living it. You taught me what it means to be truly alive." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors as it set behind the mountains. William and Rose came running up to the porch, breathless and laughing, demanding that their parents come see the baby bird they had found. Daniel and Olivia exchanged a smile and stood up, following their children into the yard. As they examined the tiny bird and discussed how best to help it, Daniel felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude wash over him. This was his life now. This house, this ranch, this woman, these children. It was not what he had planned or expected, but it was perfect in its own way. He had been lost and broken, and then Olivia had appeared in his life like a miracle, and together they had built something beautiful. The years continued to roll by, bringing more changes and challenges. When William turned 16, he began talking about wanting to join the cattle drives north, to see more of the country and prove himself as a man. Daniel understood the impulse but worried about his son's safety on the dangerous trails. "Let him go," Olivia advised. "We cannot keep him here forever, much as we might want to. He needs to find his own way, just like we did." So Daniel gave his blessing, and William went on his first cattle drive, coming back months later taller and tougher and full of stories. Rose, meanwhile, developed a passion for breeding horses, and she had a natural talent for it that impressed everyone who saw her work. Daniel and Olivia grew older together, their hair turning gray and their faces developing lines from years of sun and wind. But the love between them never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger and deeper, rooted in shared history and mutual respect. When Daniel turned 50, Olivia threw him a party at the ranch, inviting all their friends and neighbors. It was a warm summer evening, and they set up tables in the yard and served beef from their own cattle and vegetables from their garden. Music played and people danced, and Daniel stood at the edge of it all, watching his wife laugh with Mrs. Cooper and his children argue good-naturedly about something trivial. Sam Carter, who had retired from his ranch and now lived quietly in El Dorado Canyon, came over and stood beside Daniel. "You have done well for yourself, Irving," Sam said. "Better than I ever could have predicted when you first started working for me." "I got lucky," Daniel said. "I found the right woman at the right time. It was not just luck. You were smart enough to recognize what you had and brave enough to reach for it. Not every man would have done that." "Thank you, Sam, for everything. For giving me that first job, for being patient with me when I needed to figure things out, for being a good friend all these years." "It was my pleasure. You are a good man, Daniel. You have made a good life." That night, after everyone had gone home and the children had retired to their own rooms, Daniel and Olivia sat together on the porch, just as they had done thousands of times before. "What are you thinking about?" Olivia asked. "About that mountain pass." "About how different my life would be if I had not heard that gunshot, if I had not decided to investigate, if I had not found you. Do you ever regret it? The path you chose?" Daniel turned to look at her, this woman who had been his partner and his love for more than 20 years. Even with gray in her hair and lines on her face, she was still the most beautiful person he had ever seen. "Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Olivia. You and our children and this life we have built together. I would not change any of it." She leaned over and kissed him, soft and sweet. "Good. Because I feel the same way. I love you, Daniel Irving. I have loved you since the day you appeared on that mountain like a guardian angel, and I will love you until my last breath. And I will love you just as long and probably longer." They sat together as the stars came out one by one, filling the sky with their ancient light. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called, and the horses whinnied softly in their barn. The world was peaceful and good, and Daniel felt complete in a way he had never imagined possible all those years ago, when he was a lonely cowboy with nothing but his horse and his saddle, and a heart he thought was too broken to ever love again. But he had been wrong about that. Hearts could heal, lives could change, and love could find you in the most unexpected places and transform everything. More years passed, and Daniel and Olivia became grandparents when William married a sweet young woman named Sarah and had a son of his own. Rose married a neighboring rancher, and together they built up a successful horse breeding operation that became known throughout Colorado. Daniel and Olivia gradually handed over more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch to William and his family. though they stayed involved and active as long as their health allowed. They spent their later years doing the things they loved, riding across their land on cool mornings, tending their garden, playing with their grandchildren, and simply being together. On their 40th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were speeches and toasts, and a lot of laughter. William stood up and told the story of how his parents had met, embellishing the details to make it even more dramatic than it had actually been. "My father was riding through the mountains when he heard a gunshot," William said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. He could have ignored it, could have kept riding and minded his own business, but he did not. He rode toward danger because someone needed help, and that decision changed everything. Not just for him and my mother, but for all of us. We exist because of that choice, because he was brave and kind and willing to take a chance. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes as he listened to his son speak. Olivia squeezed his hand and he squeezed back, overcome with emotion. Rose spoke next, her voice quiet but firm. "What I learned from watching my parents all these years is that love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make every day, to show up for each other, to work together, to forgive and support and encourage. They taught me what a real partnership looks like, and I am grateful for that example every single day." When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he stood up slowly, leaning on his cane for support. His body had grown old and tired, but his mind was still sharp, and his heart was still full. "I want to thank all of you for being here," he said, looking around at the beloved faces. "But most of all, I want to thank Olivia. 40 years ago, I found you stranded on a mountain pass, and I thought I was rescuing you. But the truth is, you rescued me. You took a broken, lonely man and gave him a reason to live, a purpose, a family, a home. Everything good in my life comes from you. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and that is saying something, because I loved you pretty fiercely even then." Olivia was crying openly now, and several other people were dabbing at their eyes with handkerchiefs. She stood up and hugged Daniel tightly, and he held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair and feeling her heart beat against his chest. "I love you too," she whispered, "always and forever." They danced that night, slowly and carefully, moving to the music of a single fiddle under a sky full of stars. Their children and grandchildren watched, and Daniel knew they were creating a memory that would be passed down through generations, a story of love and commitment, and the magic that can happen when two people find each other against all odds. Daniel lived to be 74 years old. He passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cold winter night, with Olivia holding his hand and his children gathered around his bed. His last words were, "I love you," directed at his wife, and she said them back through her tears. Olivia followed him just 6 months later. The doctor said it was heart failure, but William and Rose knew the truth. She had died of a broken heart, unable to bear life without her beloved partner. They buried her beside Daniel on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together, under 2 simple headstones that bore their names and the dates of their lives and a single shared inscription: "Together always." Their children and grandchildren continued to work the ranch, keeping it in the family and maintaining the standards of fairness and quality that Daniel and Olivia had established. The story of how they met became a family legend, told and retold to each new generation, a reminder that love can come from the most unexpected places and transform lives in ways no one could predict. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blows just right through the canyon, people swear they can see 2 figures on horseback riding across the land together, still exploring, still working, still loving each other beyond death and into eternity. The ranch still stands today, a testament to what two people can build when they commit to each other completely, when they choose love over fear, partnership over independence, and hope over despair. It began with a cowboy who heard a gunshot and chose to investigate, who found a woman stranded on a mountain pass and offered his help without expecting anything in return. Her gratitude blossomed into true love, just as flowers bloom in spring, natural and inevitable and beautiful. And that love sustained them through 40 years of marriage, through hardships and triumphs, through the raising of children and the building of an empire, until death finally parted them in body but never in spirit. Theirs was a love story for the ages, proof that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them, when we are brave enough to take a chance on a stranger, when we open our hearts to possibility and trust that the universe has a plan we cannot yet see. Daniel Irving and Olivia Anderson. Irving lived and loved and left behind a legacy that extended far beyond the boundaries of their ranch, touching everyone who knew them and inspiring countless others who only heard their story. They proved that true love exists, that it can grow from the smallest seed of kindness into something magnificent and enduring, and that when you find it, you should hold on to it with everything you have and never let it go. And so their story ends, not with sadness but with joy, not with regret but with gratitude, not with a period but with an ellipsis that suggests the story continues somehow, somewhere, in the hearts of those who remember and in the land that still bears the mark of their devotion.